Okay, so picture this. You're just minding your own business,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden, bam, you get a legal threat.
Uh-oh.
But not just any legal threat. One from a sitting president.
Oh, wow.
And not just any president, but Emmanuel Macron of France.
Yeah, that's pretty high profile.
It is. And it's exactly what happened to Candace Owens, who,
Mhm.
as a conservative commentator.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's what we're diving into today. We're going to unpack that legal threat, that she got her reaction to it, and kind of what it all means.
It's a really fascinating case, and particularly because it's tied to this conspiracy theory about Brigitte Macron, the First Lady of France.
Right.
This theory has been going around for like a decade now, alleging that she's transgender.
Yeah.
Owens has been, publicly talking about this theory.
Yeah.
And that seems to be, what's prompted this whole legal action from the Macrons.
Exactly. And, Candace Owens, she's known for being outspoken and, not afraid of controversy.
For sure.
So in December 2024, she got this 33-page legal threat.
3 pages. Wow.
Yeah. From a law firm representing President Macron and his wife. And it's warning her against making what they consider to be defamatory statements.
Okay. And so just to be clear, this is like 6 months after Owens last made any public comments about this.
You're totally right. The timing is really strange.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder why they waited so long to take action.
It does.
And on top of that, they demanded that she keep the whole thing quiet, like under wraps.
Oh, wow.
But obviously she didn't follow that instruction.
No, she did not.
She made a whole YouTube video about it, which is what we're using for this deep dive.
Interesting. So she's really framing this as a fight for her right to free speech.
Absolutely. And she keeps bringing up how she sees this as like a clash between French and American culture.
Yeah, that's a big point.
Right. She's arguing that France, with their stricter defamation laws, is trying to impose their values on her as an American who has different free speech protections.
And that's a key difference to understand here, right? France, basically, they have stricter laws about what you can say about someone, especially if it could hurt their reputation.
Mm-hmm.
But in the U.S., we have this strong focus on free speech, even if it's controversial.
Exactly. And it kind of makes you wonder, can French defamation laws actually be enforced in the U.S.?
Right.
That's a really complex legal question, and the answer is not clear-cut.
It's not an easy one.
There's not a lot of examples of these types of international cases, which is what makes this so fascinating.
It really is, and it gets even more complicated because, Owens is claiming that the Macrons are refusing to, definitively prove that Brigitte is not transgender.
Right.
She's arguing that if it were so easy to debunk these rumors, they wouldn't need to resort to legal threats.
That's a really good point.
Wow.
What do you think about this whole burden of proof idea?
Well, it's important to remember that in a lot of legal systems, including France's, the burden of proof is on the person making the accusation. So in this case, it would typically be up to Owens to prove her claims, not the other way around.
Yeah, that makes sense. But Owens is arguing that their refusal to provide any evidence beyond just a denial is suspicious.
Yeah, I see her point there.
And she's also saying that it's kind of a contradiction. They're saying she's attacking their credibility, but then also saying it's defamatory to imply that they're lying to the French people.
Yeah, it's a bit of a catch-22 for sure.
It really is. And Owens is not holding back on her criticism.
What do you mean?
She even mocks the quote-unquote evidence that the Macrons have provided through their lawyers.
Oh, really? What evidence is that?
Apparently, they provided screenshots from an 8-year-old YouTube video of Macron's inauguration.
Okay.
And they're claiming that these screenshots show this man named Jean-Michel Trogneux, who Brigitte supposedly once was in the background.
Wow, that's a pretty unusual piece of evidence to bring forward.
It does make you wonder, what kind of proof would even be considered sufficient in a case like this?
It's a good question, and I think a lot of people are wondering how this would be different if it was happening in the U.S. instead of France.
Exactly, because there are such big differences between our laws and theirs.
There really are. Yeah, it's definitely a complex situation. And, it gets even more complicated because it's playing out so much in the court of public opinion.
Oh, totally. And, that's where Owens's skills as a commentator really come into play.
Yeah.
She's really good at using social media and her platform to kind of control the narrative.
Right.
And she's really painting this as a David versus Goliath battle, with her being, the underdog, taking on these powerful forces trying to silence her.
Which is a narrative that definitely seems to resonate with a lot of her audience.
Exactly. And she claims that, the Macrons are trying to intimidate her and derail her whole investigation.
Oh, really?
Especially because this legal threat came not long after she interviewed a French journalist.
Okay.
Who supposedly has all this evidence to support the theory.
Interesting. So it sounds like she's really building up anticipation for something.
Oh, yeah, she's not backing down at all.
So what's she planning to do with this interview?
Well, she said she's going to release it on her own website, CandaceOwens.com.
Okay.
And not just in English, but in French as well.
Wow, so she's really trying to take it to a global audience.
She is, and it's a smart move. By releasing it on her own website, she bypasses potential censorship from like YouTube or other social media sites.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And by releasing it in French, she's directly engaging with the French people.
Right, which could put even more pressure on the Macrons.
Exactly. And she goes even further. She actually claims that the Macrons are focusing on these minor inaccuracies in her reporting to distract from the bigger picture.
What do you mean?
So, she admitted to misidentifying the mother of Brigitte Macron's children in one of her videos.
Okay.
But she's saying that's just a distraction tactic.
It's a classic strategy, highlighting these small errors to try to undermine her credibility.
Right, and she knows that she calls them out on it directly in her video, saying it's an attempt to control the narrative and avoid talking about the main issue.
Which kind of brings us back to the original question. What is the main issue here?
Exactly.
Is it about Brigitte Macron's gender identity, or is it about freedom of speech? The power of these online platforms and how we navigate different narratives in this increasingly polarized world.
Right, because this case touches on so many themes. It's fascinating.
It is.
It really makes you think about the responsibilities of commentators and journalists, and how do we even figure out what's true in the digital age, and what happens when powerful people have unchecked power.
Yeah, those are really important questions, and it highlights how different cultures and legal systems view these issues. What might be considered acceptable in one country could be seen as defamatory in another.
Right, and that's really hard to navigate in this globalized world we live in.
For sure, and it looks like Owens is ready to keep pushing the boundaries and challenge the status quo.
Oh, yeah. She definitely thrives on that kind of confrontation, and it seems to be working for her.
How so?
Her audience is growing, and this whole controversy is just giving her more visibility.
I guess there's no such thing as bad publicity sometimes.
It's true. Whether you agree with her or not, she definitely knows how to get attention and start a conversation. This whole thing has really blown up, hasn't it? It's gone from a legal threat to this international back and forth with everyone talking about it online. What do you think is going to happen next? Do you think she'll actually release that interview?
I mean, that's the big question, right? It's really hard to say. But one thing's for sure, this isn't over. If she does release it, things could really escalate. Yeah. It all comes down to what's in this supposed evidence and, how damaging it might be to the Macrons.
What do you think they'll do? Will they actually try to sue her here in the U.S.?
It's a tough spot for them. Yeah. On one hand, suing her could totally backfire and just give her more attention, make her look like some free speech martyr.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if they don't do anything, it might look like they're giving in, letting her control the story.
It's a real lose-lose situation.
It is a real PR nightmare.
It makes you think about, other journalists and commentators who are critical of leaders in other countries.
Yeah. What could this mean for them?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What if this discourages international reporting?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
If journalists are worried about getting sued by foreign governments, they might not be as willing to investigate certain things or be critical.
So what does this all mean for, the average person trying to understand all of this?
Well, this is obviously an extreme example, but it does bring up some really important questions.
Yeah.
About free speech and, how power works in our world, especially now that everything's so interconnected.
Right.
It really highlights why we need to be critical thinkers and, be media literate, especially with all the information we're bombarded with online.
Absolutely. It's so hard to know what to believe sometimes.
It is. This is a good reminder to be skeptical and question things and look for different perspectives before making up your mind.
You can't just take everything at face value, especially with something like this. We have to be willing to do our own research. Look at the sources and think for ourselves.
I think that's a really important point. And it's also a reminder that we all play a role in shaping the narrative.
Also.
Through the things we share, the conversations we have, even the actions we take, we can all contribute to a more informed public conversation.
I think that's a great takeaway from this deep dive. It's easy to get caught up in the drama of it all, but at the end of the day, it's up to each of us to decide what we believe and how we engage with these complicated issues.
Yeah, and to remember that this is just one story, one piece of a much bigger puzzle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's our deep dive into this saga of Candace Owens and the Macrons. It's definitely been a wild ride with lots of twists and turns, and it seems like there's more to come.
Who knows what'll happen next?
We'll be keeping an eye on it for sure. And maybe we'll even revisit it in a future episode. But for now, we'll leave you with this. What do you think? Whose side are you on? And what does this mean for the future of free speech and international relations? Let us know your thoughts. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.